Hi everyone, welcome to the Capital Canvas Pod. Myself and Michael. We've been away for a bit, but we're back now. And right now we've gotten quite a bit of requests from people to kind of distill all the conversations that we've had over time in the last couple of weeks and months and kind of provide some names. Um, we're a bit hesitant to do that because I think that people should always do their own research before they make any personal investments. But what we're going to do now, or what we have done, is to create um, like a portfolio of AI stocks that kind of tracks that AI team. And so we have a portfolio of like 20 stocks that we picked. And we are, over the next couple of weeks, going to pick five each. I'm going to pick five names of that 20. Mike is going to pick five names of those 20. And then we're going to discuss why we are so bullish on these names in the AI race going forward. So we have 20 names. We will share that in the comment section and also maybe like post some of those names on Instagram. But right now, the very first stock that I'm bullish, I think we're both bullish on this name. I'll put it that way. And I think it's this AMD. So today we'll kind of touch on AMD to explain why we're kind of bullish on AMD, and then we can then in subsequent weeks talk about the other nine. So four more for me and then five for Michael. You have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that I'm excited about the names. They cut across pretty much the entire value chain, from the almighty ASML that makes the machine that powers,
Yeah.
GPUs and the entire thing that, you can distill the AI race to, um, up onto, the SaaS guys, the security guys. Yeah, so it's quite a diverse space and names as well. So I'm excited to get stuck in discuss this.
Cool. Let's get into it.
Yep,
Um,
AMD.
so AMD. Now, the way that I like to analyze stocks is to look at I have a framework, right? And my framework is very simple. The first thing that I look at is the industry. The second thing that I look at is what is the competitive landscape. The third thing that I look at is the quality of management. And then I look at valuation and then ultimately if there are any risk attached to that name. Now, when we start off with industry, you're essentially looking at the mega trend. And I think if you don't know, if you've never heard about AI, then you might be living under the rock. So we all know that, AI is here, it's transformational. And right now, if you think about the AI accelerator market where AMD plays, Lisa Su, who is the CEO of AMD, has forecasted that the AI accelerator market will grow to about 500 billion in the next 3 years to 2028. And then you can say, well, that's somebody who is conflicted, right? And then you then look for external sources that have also projected what the market will look like. And then you have Goldman Sachs also projecting that by 2030, the market will go to about 400 to $600 billion again in the next 5 years. So there is, based on the projection by people who have some level of involvement in the AI race and projecting that we're going to reach those very crazy numbers. Now, the themes and the things that are happening around the market kind of suggest that those numbers are real. I think if you look at Elon and Grok 4 that just came out and the 200,000 GPUs and they hope to expand it to 1 million GPUs. If you look at Meta essentially saying they're going to build a data center that would be like the size of Manhattan, like you can already tell that from a compute scaling perspective, every hyperscaler, every tech company are trying to grow the number of GPUs that they have just because of the sheer demand that we're seeing in the market. And then if you think about all of the GPU sales that we've had up to date as majority going to training. And now we're starting to enter that inference scaling phase. Now, the idea is training is when you get the data, you train a model, and then the inference is you're actually just querying the model, and then it's spitting out the response that you typically get from your chat GPTs, your Grok, your Gemini, Llama, whatever model that you use. So we're seeing that is scaling as well. And then if you can forecast into the future where everybody is now using all of these models at scale, everybody's paying for it, you can already tell the level of compounding that you're going to see with the usage, right? And then maybe the last thing to talk about in the market as well is just the competition. Like if you the way to know how important this thing is how much people are plowing into it. And I think Meta is like the it's that company that is just excessively investing ridiculously into this market. They're gathering talent. They're paying $100 million, even though you said it's not that high, but there are other reports that suggest that it is. So they're putting a lot of money into this. So that just kind of tells you that there's a lot of demand growth forecasted into the future. And then if you think about inference, because another comment that people have had is when it comes to hardware, there's a risk that you build out the hardware to a point that we don't need it anymore.
Mm.
Same thing that happened to Cisco in the 2000s. And if you look at the Cisco stock charts, it went up dramatically and it went down as well. Um, I don't think that is going to happen in this case, just because inference is an ongoing thing. And the cheaper these chips get, the lesser they're able to charge per month. And then ultimately the increase in adoption for different use cases that we're seeing. Right now, we're still on using LLMs, which is large language models, your chatbots. And then ultimately, we're going to go into the agentic era. We're going to go into robotics. So you can already tell that this market is really just getting started as large as it already looks. Now, that is the first part. Now, the second thing, which I mentioned, is the competitive landscape. Now, up until this point, the winner of this market has been Nvidia. Like, Nvidia has essentially captured almost 100% of the market, right? And if
Pretty
you,
much.
yeah, if you try to think about not until maybe last quarter when AMD essentially went from zero to like $5 billion in data center revenues. Now, if you think about how did Nvidia become this dominant in this space, right? A couple of reasons. First is the performance of their chips. Second is the fact that they've kind of gone from just selling chips to like building infrastructure on the racks that they create. Third is the software layer that they have, which is the CUDA. And then also just the industry relationship that they built with all these hyperscalers and people who are buying their chips. They are right now investing in different hyperscalers. They have investment in CoreWeave, they have investments in ABS. So because of that kind of relationship, those people are almost compelled to use only NVIDIA chips, so that's another strategy that they've adopted. Now, if I'm being bullish, if I'm aware of all of this, and then the question you then ask is, well, why are you then bullish about AMD, right? So when you think about the performance of the chips, AMD has essentially gone from not being able to compete to actually outperforming NVIDIA on different metrics, right? So for instance, they've kind of released the new MI 355 AI chip, and Lisa Su did mention that he offered like 40% improvements in processing tokens per dollar compared to NVIDIA, right? And that is particularly very important in the inference market where you're essentially going to be charging dollar per token. So the cheaper it is, the better for the company because they're able to offer at the lower rate and increase adoption. Now, the other thing that I mentioned is infrastructure, because I think what NVIDIA did really good was to know that, look, we're not just going to be selling chips. We need to make sure that these people are able to build with our chips and reduce the time to market as well. So what AMD has done, because they don't have that internal ability or capability to build the systems like NVIDIA has done in the last couple of years. So they've gone ahead to acquire several companies. One of the companies that they acquired is ZT System, who essentially designs servers and solutions for cloud computing and AI. So now that rack level system where that NVIDIA had, AMD now has the ability to do that as well. So that is also then taken away from that moat that NVIDIA had in that market. And then the third thing is the software. Now, one of the reasons again why NVIDIA has been so successful is the CUDA platform. So CUDA just kind of is that layer on top of the GPUs that helps programmers and developers to write better programs and increase the efficiency and the use of the GPUs. Now, again, AMD has then gone out to acquire other companies to make them competitive in this space. So they've acquired Nord AI. They're now working on ROCm 7, which they've released. And I mean, it's not quite at the point where it's able to compete with CUDA from NVIDIA. but it is an open source system and it is working optimally. Now it is to improve over time and hopefully at some point in the future catch up with Nvidia's CUDA. But it just kind of shows how much progress that they've had over the years. And then industry relationships. Nvidia has essentially locked down all the hyperscalers for years. What we're now seeing, if you watch the last presentation from AMD, is that AMD is now working with 7 of the 10 core tech companies that are building this. So I'm talking XAI, Oracle, Microsoft, Meta, and all the other guys. So that industry relationship that Nvidia has, I think all of those players now realize that you're better off having competition in that market. Because if you look at Nvidia, if you just go on any sort of stock screener, you find that they have, I think, 55% net profit margin, which is ridiculous. They're probably top five on the highest company of that size. And for other companies that are essentially their customers, you want the price to drop. But if the competition does not exist, then Nvidia has absolute pricing power, and whatever they charge you, you have to pay, right? So it is beneficial for the entire industry and all the other players to ensure that there's like another player that has that level of that has good performance and can compete with Nvidia. And then maybe something else that would also help in the competitive landscape is in the last couple of years, I think earlier this year, Trump did ban the exports of certain chips to China. For Nvidia, I think is the H20s that was specifically designed for China. And then for AMD, I think is the MI308 series. And what we're now getting now is that there's now the license for Nvidia and AMD to export those chips. So that would ultimately again increase demand. So I mean, those are all of those things that are right now competitive situation of an AMD. And I think with all of those things that I've mentioned, I really see them coming out and competing, especially in the inference market, to a lesser degree training, because I think Nvidia is still having a very strong goal in that space. But I think for inference, most of those chips that AMD is now creating is optimized for inference. And then the third thing, which sometimes I debate whether or not this is probably the most important thing or the third thing actually, is the quality of management. Now, I always say to people, regardless of what industry you are in, if you have a great management, you would always figure it out, right? So if you think about AWS, if you think about Amazon and you say, oh, Amazon only sells books, I'm not going to invest. You're essentially saying you don't trust the management to figure it out. But if you say, oh, Jeff Bezos is a great entrepreneur and he's going to figure it out, well, all of a sudden they've added Prime Video to the business, they've added AWS, they've scaled their retail business ridiculously. So same thing with Tesla, started off selling cars, all of a sudden they're in energy, they're in robotaxi, they're curating robots. So at the end of the day, the quality of management would always be very important. And then in this case, if you think about Lisa Su and the other board of directors, they're just extremely competent. And something like this has happened before when they were competing in the CPU market with Intel. And then Lisa Su essentially just brought the company out of the hole that they were in. And all of a sudden they have, I think, mid 20%, maybe like 25% market share in that market in the CPU market. So they just kind of demonstrated that over time they have the ability to respond to headwinds that they're facing and they've come out on top. And I think one of the very fundamental ways of actually assessing the quality of management is to maybe go back in time, look at what they said they were going to do, and then see if they actually did it, right? So in the case of AMD, you can argue they did project that they were going to do, I think, 30% data center revenue growth by I think in Q4 2021, and then they delivered 40%. They projected $3.5 billion in AI chip revenue by 2024. They've done 4.2%, $4.2 billion in Q1 2025. They did say that they were gonna launch the MI300 series, and they promised 50% better efficiency than the H100, which is Nvidia's offer, and they did 60% better in inference. So over time, they've said certain things that they want forward-looking state. They've made forward-looking statements, and they've actually gone on to achieve those things, right? So for me, I just have strong faith in this company. So all of the things that I've mentioned, the ability to develop chips with incredible performance, I think the question you then ask yourself is, can you sustain this momentum? Can you create the chip that you said you can do? And I think just looking at what they've done historically, I have no reason to believe that they can't. And right now, I really do trust the management. And for me, trusting management is like extremely important. If you are trying to invest in any company, it doesn't really matter what industry they are in. You just have to figure out who is leading this company and can they figure it out. And in this case, I really do think that Lisa Su and the management team of AMD can and will figure this out. You know, and then maybe the third thing that I'll talk about is the valuation. Now, a lot of people, if you look at the traditional valuation metrics like the price to earnings ratio, you can argue that AMD's the valuation is a bit rich, right? I think it's trading at maybe 90 times PE at the time of this recording. But if you actually look at the growth expectations of the company and then maybe use something like the PEG ratio, what you find is that the growth justifies the high PE ratio essentially. And there's a lot of acquisitions that they've done over time. And then if you look at all of the numbers that they have, about $3 billion of expenses is coming from amortization of intangibles from acquisitions. So that is like cost in the past. It doesn't really impact cash flow going forward. So I think in the nearest future, the valuation will normalize in terms of like the PE ratio, and then we'll start to see more traditional ratio like 30 times earnings for the price, and then maybe 35 times earnings. Another way to kind of think about this is if you assume that the $500 billion market for inference is real, and now remember, this is just AI inference. This has nothing to do with the CPUs that they're already selling. Now, the CPU business is still very important. I think there was one time Elon and the Tesla team incorporated Grok into Tesla cars, and the Grok only worked on the Tesla cars that had AMD chips in them. It didn't work for those that had Intel. That just goes on to show you how much advanced AMD's chips are relative to Intel in the CPU market, and ultimately relative to Nvidia when we talk about inference in the AI market, right? So if you think about the $500 billion industry to be, market to be real, and then you assume that, you know what, I don't know, Nvidia is still going to dominate the market, not as much as they are dominating it right now. So maybe Nvidia's share of the market drops from 95% to, I don't know, 75%, and AMD captures 25% of that market, right? Now, if they capture 25% of that, that means the revenue will be 125 billion, right? Now, assuming a net margin of 25%. Now, this is me being conservative, right? Because there'll be operating leverage. Some of the cost is already fixed costs that the other businesses will absorb. So ultimately, this 25% may be higher. But if we keep it conservative and say 25%, right? It means that your net profit would be 31 billion, right? At the 30 times PE multiple, that's already $938 billion, roughly about $1 trillion, right? So, and that is just from the AI compute accelerator market. Okay. It's not talking about the existing CPU market that they already have and things like that. So, and the company's market cap, I don't know, I think it's about 250 billion right now or something or thereabout. So if you layer on that $1 trillion on that, I mean, I think everybody can do the math. We're talking 5x, 4x, yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of, this just shows that there's a lot of opportunities in this market. And I think AMD is well positioned because they have strong performance on the chips. They have great management. They are doing all the right things with the acquisition. They've essentially looked at Nvidia's model and said, oh, you've beaten us over these years because you had better infrastructure, you had better performing chips, and you had the CUDA system, right? So now we're going to go open source and we're going to acquire ZT system to give us a bit of, pull up to help us capture that infrastructure market as well, to give us some strength in that area so we can better compete with Nvidia going forward. They've done acquisition Node AI to make their software platform also improve. And then ultimately, I just think they've kind of put all the places, they're taking all the right steps to ensure that they're able to compete in this market. So look, that's why, in a nutshell, why I'm so bullish on AMD. And I think it all boils down to the execution of that management team. And right now, I don't have any reason to doubt that team. I think led by Lisa Su, she has done it before from a leadership perspective, from a technical perspective. I mean, she's been in this market for decades. She's PhD electrical engineering from MIT. So like, there's absolutely no reason to not trust that this company can deliver and execute on everything that they've promised. So my 5-year price target. I mean, I try not to be too precise with like a specific price because I think I don't if you ask anybody, I don't think anyone knows what the market is going to look like in 5 years. And we've heard this from OpenAI, Sam Altman, we've heard it from the CEO of Grok. I think trying to come up with a precise number is borderline arrogant, to be honest. I don't think I think you're just giving yourself too much credit.
It's a full sale as well. Like
Exactly.
in
It's
1 year, in
it's
1 year time, someone is gonna come to you and be like, "Well, this full set, this thing was gonna be, um,
exactly.
20% upside. Nice, 50% upside. If I knew, I would have put in more money." They're
Yeah,
wrong. The accuracy ratio, accuracy rate is too poor. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think even Nvidia CEO Jensen said the same thing. He literally criticized their internal forecast, saying that's the worst forecast anyone has done he has ever seen in his life. And that is expected because like the adoption of AI, everything is moving so fast that I don't think anyone who comes to you and says, "Oh, I can predict what will happen in the next 1 year with any reasonable level of precision," it's just lying to you. So I am not I'm not inclined to give like a specific price, but I really see an incredible amount of upside over the coming years for AMD in this market. But I think what is important is to get it right directionally, based on your analysis of every other thing that I've said, and giving specific numbers is, like you said, a fool's errand. And now I think maybe I should also mention because sometimes when I mention how bullish I am on AMD, some people think I'm bearish Nvidia. I am not. I think Nvidia. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think the entire market is gonna grow. So like both of them will keep capturing market share, right, going forward. I just think just because of the size of AMD is it has a potential more potential to give you better multiples on your money invested. I think
yeah,
Nvidia is still gonna be great. I think even if you look at when I was trying to project what the market share of AMD would be, I'm still giving Nvidia about 75%. I think they're still gonna dominate the market. But
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, as far as my goal is not to receive dividend from earnings earned and more from multiples on um the amount that I invest, then I would rather go for AMD in this case.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that Nvidia currently sells Blackwell for what, 32 grand, I think, and AMD is
Yeah,
expecting
30
to
to 40.
sell. AMD is expecting to. They currently sell their best GPU for 15 grand. Now with the new, improved version and all of the power that comes with this 350, they're expecting about 10K more. That is what max 25K. That is a significant discount
Yeah,
to Nvidia's 35K, 32K chip. So
especially when you're buying 100,000 of those.
yeah, especially for folks like Meta that are looking to have significant capital investment in this. 35K of 35K, that's one over seven, that's significant discount. So I think they're
Yeah,
gonna still quickly steal market share from Nvidia, and I think that's where that growth comes from. So
yeah.
yeah, but I'm super bullish on this one. It's a no-brainer.
And and my thing here is I'm gonna hold for a long term. I think there's some people that like if you're gonna be scared if your stock drops 20%, 10%, then you shouldn't own equities, like, or even if you want to own some sort of equity, then just go and buy the index, okay? But if you're I'll speak for myself. I am someone who likes to do the work, put in the work, do some research, just same as you, figure out what is the market missing here and how is the market going to grow going forward, and whether this company has the management that can lead the company to capture some of those market share. Once I do that analysis, look at evaluation and things like that, then I'm willing to put a portion of my portfolio into that name. And that's essentially what is happening here. But again, this is not investment advice. This is my analysis, just trying to share and not gatekeep. And then, I mean, people should do their own research, but we're going to publish the 20 stocks that we think would do really well in the AI era. I think there's certain people that, I mean, I've said it myself that, oh, I wish I was born when I was investing through when the internet was created. I would
.com, yeah, yeah,
I would have bought Amazon at 20 cents and now it's like $200. I would have made 1,000x my money, blah, blah, blah. Everybody says that. But if you speak to people, even those that lived through the creation of the internet, they will tell you this is literally the most transformational technology, right, that they've seen in their lifetime.
yeah.
So the opportunity is just immense. And I don't think people spend enough time trying to figure out what this thing is and how they can invest through it. I mean, what I always say is, I mean, there are a couple ways for you to benefit from this. One, let's say you can found a company that is doing something with AI. All well and good, great. You're gonna make a shit ton of money. Or you work for a company as an employee and get a lot of stock options and work for a company that is creating something with AI. Then you can make a shit ton of money as well. Now, not everybody is gonna fall into that category, right? Unfortunately. Now, the only other way that I know to get exposure to this thing is for you to actually invest in these companies. Some of them are public, some of them are private, unfortunately, and taking longer to list. But if you can't participate in those first two areas, which is starting your own company or working for a company that is starting off and using AI, then I think you need to figure out a way to invest in this AI race, have a long-term horizon thinking, don't necessarily trade it too often, except you know exactly what you're doing. But if you're looking at the returns from Nvidia, from Amazon, from Uber, from all these companies that have benefited from the creation of the internet, then this is your chance again. And like I said, you don't have to do all the work that I'm doing in terms of like analyzing companies and stuff like that. You can just buy indexes. There's the QQQ. I think you've mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah.
But for me, I just think some of these indexes, you can almost split them up into S&P 7 and S&P 493.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll take my bets on trying to figure out how to play that with a bit more precision than picking 500 names. So but I think everybody should find a way. And if even if you think about the US government, they are literally giving $1,000 or investing, is it 1,000 or $10,000 for every kid born?
I think it was
Um,
1,000, yeah.
yeah, for every kid born, and even the 401k, they're trying to say you can now invest. They're trying to make you invest, create an opportunity for you to invest in crypto. So I think people are just waking up to the idea that the world is gonna shift very quickly,
Yeah.
and you're better off being a part of it than leaving your money in the savings account and just accumulating 2% per year. I mean, so I mean
Yes.
that's my take on that.
Yeah, there's never been a better time to start investing. I think Jason has said the same thing. Many people sort of saw, the birth of the internet has said the same thing. It is nothing like anyone has ever seen before. And it's so bad that and the reason why I think I really like what you said is some folks are saying, well, OpenAI, ChatGPT, everything is now out there. It's still early days. It is still very, very nascent. Folks are still basically building the picks and shovel, which is the data centers across the world, and it's not even reached the global or the broader part of the world yet. You're still talking the US. Europe is still sort of lagging behind. The rest of the world is pretty
As
much lagging
usual.
behind. Yeah, so I think the rest of the world is going to wake up one day and say, well, just like the phone and all of the fiber optics and all the other stuff that the internet has expected or tech has expected. It would wake up one day and say, well, we need to build all of these things, and you see the surge again. So yeah, I'm super excited and bullish, and for the long term as well. I mean, for the next
Yeah.
5 years, we'll see how this goes.